Welcome to a special December 5th full moons, first day of the full moon. It will last until Sunday. Sabbath begins at midnight, the Sabbath of the dancing goddess in the dragon kingdom. And about to put some powdered instant coffee. Have a little bit of coffee, gonna do a little bit of a semi-mystical, semi-rock and roll geopolitical freestyle mode. Yours truly grateful, thankful for my rent paid, electricity bills paid, got food and coffee for the weekend and for the coming days, and it is the 5th of December, so paid my rent, paid my electricity bills, paid 50-50 for the Netflix. So I got Netflix for the month of December, which is gonna be. Yesterday was cold, the coldest day yet of 2025, and it's not officially winter yet. Of course, officially winter. It's on the 21st, 22nd of December. The equinox, the solstice equinox, it's coming on in a few weeks. So, but these past 3 days was really cold. It was like -10, -11, and yesterday with the wind chill, it felt like -18, -20. They said on the radio. So, with that -20, I went still for a march because I march rock and roll, but for a few hours every day. I got to average between October 22nd and March 19th. I got to average 20 hours minimum of marching workout per week, and from March 20th, March 19th to about October 21st, 22nd, I got to average 25 hours, and this has been a standard. Of course, with my Asperger's, I have these ritual like routines for many years, of course, and I don't mind change that much, especially if it will be financial economic. But of course, I do have my routines where it's super intense, super focused, and super like kind of semi, not that rigid routines, but there are some routines which are kind of set. They're a bit manageable, but they have to be done on a daily basis, such as, of course, hours and hours of geopolitical studies and analysis of the news and analysis of the events, and of course rock and roll and geopolitics 24/7, and sports and fitness. And yours truly, Adrian HannaH Dragon, laying the foundations for the dancing goddess in the dragon kingdom with 718 trillions of kisses, 718 trillions of kisses. A trillion has 12 zeros, do the math. And it's always God bless, Goddess kiss, the coming of our empire of the 63, always for the 10, the 50, and the 3 Canada, United States to be fused into the Imperial Republican complex based on my trinity of theories such as the CIT, citizen integration theory, the DRT, the fusion theory, the DFT. And now we're not going to prolong. Happy full moon feast for those mystic spiritual seekers, and of course for the forgotten goddess event. Every full moon is a forgotten goddess event, so we're gonna put a little bit of that rock and roll. Let's get 1, 2, 3, and then we're gonna get a little bit of that loving here with that, and that's all we're gonna get. Some coffee. So this, I gotta be saying it again because I mentioned it in my videos. I've been purchasing this. I found it a few months ago, I think around July. I bought it first, June, July, this 2025, and it's natural, natural instant powdered coffee. So this company is from Ukraine. It doesn't say the country of origin, but it's 50 grams and it's 99 cents. So I buy it every time on special for 99 cents. And even regular price is affordable if you think of the quantity, not necessarily the quality, but the quantity. Of course, I save about, so if I buy 3, I save about $4, $3 to $4, instead of buying the 150 grams, because it's 50 grams. See, it's 50 grams. So 3 of these give me basically three like that give me the 150 co-equivalent of what I usually purchase is 150 grams. Usually, sometimes it's different brands that are 80 grams or 95 grams or 120 grams or 140 grams, but the regular one that I buy most is usually around $6 or $7, or on special sometimes for $4.99 or $5.49. So that is usually 150 grams. So if I make the calculation, of course I do save money buying this one. So I'm gonna pour some water, have some coffee, and for the butchers, the bakers, the nurses, the truckers, the firefighters, gonna go down rock and roll. Always open for business, friends with benefits only. Pledge your allegiance, thou our family, support the dream. My dream is, of course, manifesting for a mass public-private partnership across the North American Collective, of course, to implement my trinity of theories, the CIT, citizen integration theory, the DRT, debt fusion theory, and of course the democratic fusion theory. Gotta give a shout out to my anonymous friend for giving me this special holiday mug. Look at that, red. Special red, 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 red. Why I said, get that rock and roll of the heaven upset. I rock and roll. It's not necessarily that my voice is a great rock and roll star, rock star like, but nonetheless, the great lyrics. So the lyrics are the best. The lyrics are the best. The lyrics, when I create lyrics, I'm the prince of rock and roll, best among the best in terms of creation of the songs I would have put in the 20th century and 21st century, and I do it freestyle on the daily. And of course, you got that little red cardinal, and you got this little red and green together. So gotta sip a little bit of the coffee and go a little bit of rock and roll meditation, spiritual meditation for world peace and the forgotten goddess, for world peace and the forgotten goddess, and always for my anonymous friend. If I make a me, I'm gonna give 50%, and always for my fellow people with Asperger's or neurodivergent Aspies of the world unite. I know our community suffers from lots of unemployment. Is 80%, sometimes even higher than 80% for fellow Aspies. I actually have a little milk, so I'm gonna put on the full moon because it's milk. Thank you for the donation of the milk. So I get that calcium for the bones and the teeth, and gonna be milking it up. It's rare, but I had it donated, so I'm using it. Thank you for the cows as well. And this is a co-op, so cooperatives and farmers, butchers, bakers, nurses, daycare workers, doctors, electricians, the plumbers, the nurses, and of course my fellow Aspies and mystics of the world, Thelemites, 93 for that gang, gang, gang. Oh yeah, it's a good full moon coffee. And yesterday at 7 p.m. the full moon began, so it's until Sunday's 3 days. So today's the first day, tomorrow's gonna be the second day, and Sunday's the third and final day of the full moon event ritual, like feast. It's a feast, cleaning, purifying, meditation, cleaning, purifying, meditation, cleaning, purifying. That's always for the forgotten goddess on the full moon. So who calls me names, and I start to like it. Forgotten goddess throws a little bit of a spittle at me, and I start rock and rolling from heavens. There's your rock and roll. It gets a little bit of that spittle on me, and I start rock and rolling from the goddess heavens. So it's always God bless, always goddess bless. I know. That's what I will to build a forgotten goddess temple, and I gotta call it a heart for all those who are knowing what I'm going to make a reference to before I forget, because in the past videos I did mention it. And of course, if you don't know, my will is of course to build four buildings, 4 structures, and those 4 structures of course are are thus the forgotten goddess temple, to be 11 times bigger than the we have in Montreal. We have the oratory, St. Joseph's Oratory, and of course I will to build the forgotten goddess temple 11 times bigger than the St. Joseph's Oratory on the Canadian-US border, to build the Imperial Citizens Coliseum, the Imperial People's Citizens Coliseum, to be 11 times bigger than the Hardball Ball, where actually Super Bowl 47 is known as so it has several nicknames: Hardball Ball, Blackout Ball, and of course it is that Super Bowl where I will to build it on the Canadian-US border to be an integrated sports, the biggest ever sports coliseum arena ever built is to be built on the Canadian-US border. This Canadian who was born in the United States 3 times post 70-76, that big superstructure to be built to be 11 times bigger than the New Orleans. It's now known as Caesar Superdome, but it changed names just like I changed names from Caesar Superdome. Now is known as Caesar Superdome, but before that it was known of course as the Mercedes-Benz, and it's a stadium where many Super Bowls were fought and played and battled out. One of my favorite Super Bowls, top 5 Super Bowls in my agenda, is of course Super Bowl 47, aka Hardball Ball, aka Blackout Ball. And of course that sports arena is known as, also before it was known as, the Louisiana Superdome. So to be 11 times bigger than the Louisiana Superdome, and to build the pyramid, the House of the Dragon, where I can have open doors, because here I can't have open doors Monday to Friday, but in a bigger space, I would definitely have the availability to have more open houses and for certain time slots, because I still live in a small place. We're not that bigger than where I used to live, I moved here about 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago, in 2015 summer, and I came here with nothing really. I did lots of work, and I do independent work on the daily. I love to volunteer, and it's friends with benefits only from now on. I lost a lot of friends. I made a lot of friends in the past 10 years, but they ask for phone numbers, exchange phone numbers, 2, 3 times exchanges, and it's hard for Aspies to make long-term friends. And from now on, just to get the boundaries, and of course the boundaries set and the expectations, is friends with benefits. I could definitely use friends with benefits for massage exchanges because I live a very healthy, active lifestyle, and of course, otherwise, just pledge your allegiance, support the dream and our family. Pledge your allegiance, to our family, Dragon Army, the Dancing Goddess Army, to complementary covenant and cooperative institutions that I'm calling the creation thereof as a mass public-private partnership across the North American Collective. Because the North American Collective Civilizational Complex, or what of course I call as a philosopher, as a geopolitical theoretical analyst, theorist, and strategist, and thinker, the North American Civilizational Collective, whence of course here we made the great linguistic compromise of the French language, and of course we continue to do so. Somebody now, of course, learning some French, learning some English, and it's always double trouble, bilingual rock and roll here from Montreal, the island of the Hawk Island, Montreal, of course, for my fellow Canadians, North Americans, of course, it's North Americans Unite, and it's always for the bakers, the butchers, the nurses, the truckers, the firefighters, the plumbers, the electricians, those train conductors on the go, and the nurses changing diapers now, the nurses finishing a 12-hour shift, they just finished a 12-hour shift now, some way close to noon, maybe they started at midnight, they're about to finish their in the 44 minutes they're about to finish a 12-hour shift. So I gotta salute them. I gotta salute the truckers, construction workers, public utility workers. I call it a heart now that I'm on the topic of the public workers. Please, billionaire, mass finance, of course, by the NHL, NFL, MLB, NBA. Give some tickets to the public workers. Give some tickets to the public workers. Give some tickets to the public workers. That would be something which would be nice to do. To give some tickets. Give some tickets to the public workers. That would be really nice if you'll be giving some tickets to the public workers. That would be something which would be greatly appreciated. And of course, to reduce the ticket cost by 44.9%, 44.93%, that would be a great ideal. Of course, in these tough economic times, I just saw yesterday that the prices of food are about to increase in Canada. The price of food. The prices of food are about to increase in Canada, which is, of course, rather alarming. Myself being financially stressed, my only stress now is financial, so we have to of course dictate, and getting the dictum of course of being the consequential appellation of where the dictations are, in the consequential of course of the dynamics of our interaction with the economic and the financial consequential prudence of our commercial economic system of the North American complex, integrated into the globalized war and the realities of the trade war and the potential escalation of geopolitical conflicts. I got to make a reassessment and a restate, of course, that I predicted what's happening now back in 2019. So I predicted what's happening now in 2019. In 2019, I predicted what's happening now in 2019. In October, November, I predicted that there was going to be an international conflagration in the coming years. So, of course, 6 years ago, in 2019, October, I have predicted that there will be an international conflagration, as just as we have seen now. And in February, between mid-February and mid-March, I had COVID right here in this room off Sun Temple. I always say I died during COVID. I got triple vaxxed, and I call it a heart to please keep as much as you can the protocols. I always carry my open disinfectant, hand sanitizer for bacteria. There's bacteria, microbes, and germs, so it's good to keep habits like that, good habits, and I always encourage people to work out, train, exercise, and I started my fitness journey in 2017. Before that, I was depressed. Before summer 2017, I was depressed and suicidal. Before summer 2017, for a few years, I was depressed and suicidal. From about 2014, from about end of 2014 till about August 2017, and crossing Canada coast to coast in 2017 made me establish a strong esprit de corps with my fellow Canadians, and that was something which I consequently always, many a times I recall in my videos and when I discourse that event, who really changed the trajectory of my life. I was really depressed, suicidal. I almost took my life, and it was tough times. I live with many of my scars. Actually just today I gotta send a message and send an email, because I found an email to retrieve some archives from the Jewish General Hospital where I went. I even survived a few attacks in the past, and one vicious surprise attack. I was hit in the head a few times. Hit my head on the concrete and had a dislocated right arm, right shoulder, and I was bloodied up. I went to the Jewish General Hospital. They cracked back my right arm. It was cracked back, and I was put on some meds. So I want to know what the medication was. You probably have it in the archives. And I have some trouble remembering my life prior to winter 2014. February, January 2014. Before that, my life is like a flashes and like a blackout. Blackout of like flashes. But that's a long time ago already. So it's more than 11 years and 9 months. No, 10 months because we're in December. So it's gonna be close to 12 years. More than wow. February 2014. My life prior to 2014 is like officially the term is retrograde amnesia, RA. So most of what I know is what I had in the past 11 years in written kept journals. Journals, for example, such as the tattoo. Like I know this tattoo, I got it in 2003. This tattoo of Canada, get it tatted up, tatted up. Canada, tatted up, 2003. Anyways, it's not that important. I guess I died on the island. I'm being reborn on the island. I got my second home, Mount Royal, calling the legions for the Red Forest. Pledge your allegiance to our family. Make that forest red, forest on the mountain, the mistress on the mountain, Mount Royal, the three-peak mountain right in the center of the island of the empire. Double trouble. Presidency, and of course co-equilibrium with the Montreal-Washington axis, and of course the quadrilateral with the California, LA, San Francisco, and of course the West Coast. Gotta get a lot of cleaning, a lot of rebirth, a lot of rebuilding of our ghettos. We gotta rebuild the ghettos. We have to rebuild the ghettos, the North American collective civilization, as we're gonna transfuse into the Imperial Republic, and we gotta mass invest in the rehabilitation of our population, the rejuvenation, and of course for SSD, coast to coast, the integration of our security force in our plateaus, and to do the great census. We have to do the great census. Check hundreds of my videos in the past 3.5 years. You're gonna get more acquainted with my philosophies, theories, and being yours truly Canadian Quebecer who has lived in the United States 3 times. I believe in reincarnations. I'm a mystic. You gotta read that George Patton, Through a Glass Darkly. One of my favorite poems is George Patton's Through a Glass Darkly. He believed in reincarnations, but George Patton didn't mention that he was a man. He only mentioned his masculine male reincarnations. But myself, sometimes I was born a man, a woman, a man, a woman, a woman, a man, man, a woman, a woman, man, 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 a woman, man, a woman, woman, man, 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 man, a woman, man, a man, a woman, a woman, man, man, woman. So now I'm 50-50 basically, androgynous, pansexual, and I lived in the United States 3 times post 76. I was born here as a daughter of a Fidjurois, around 1680, and I lived tough times back then. It was New France. I wasn't a Quebecoise. I was a Quebecoise, a Quebecer, New France woman, born here between 1680 and 1735, and life was tough here at the beginning. First 100 years, life was very tough. We didn't have the economic, commercial, financial systems we have today that we developed mostly in the 20th century and 21st century. Here, Canada, Quebec, United States, post Second World War, mostly the development. Before, in the 19th century, 18th century, 17th century, life was very tough. Especially if we had winters like we had these past 3 days. Without the electricity. Go Hydro Quebec, go. Thank you for building the plants and having electricity. We gotta build some more because civilization is a privilege. That was my thesis back of 2023 in February. Of course, the privilege of civilization. The privilege of civilization. And civilization really is a privilege. Civilization is a privilege. We all have it as individual and part of the collective. The privilege of civilization manifests, and of course, in the different pluralities where we have, of course, consequently to be in the apparatus of the civilizational complex and context where we are now to be discussing my thesis, which I presented to the world, that civilization is a privilege. So we have the privilege of civilization as a whole at the macro level, at the North American collective level, because we constitute an emerging civilizational complex. In the North American complex, we are, of course, an emerging civilizational complex which has its different counterparts as individual and as collective, as we manifest our individual sovereign citizenship and liberty in the macro civilizational collective at the macro level of the North American complex and the individual. I don't want to get too philosophical, academic about it. Just suffice it to say that we all have, when we use, for example, electricity, when we use public parks, when we use the highways, when we drive on the highways, on the roads, those are privileges of civilization. So all my dream is, of course, a mass public-private partnership for the collective North American civilizational complex. It is a mass public-private partnership, basically a PPP, fundamentally a public-private partnership. Basically, that is my dream, is a public-private partnership across the North American civilizational complex across North America, and of course to implement my DRT, the debt refusion theory, the DFT, democratic fusion theory, the CIT, citizen integration theory, as I encourage all to work out, train, exercise. I lost in this room off some temple about between 80 and 93 pounds since 2017 when I crossed Canada coast to coast. That event made me establish a strong esprit de corps with my fellow Canadians, and back then I established a strong esprit de corps with my fellow Canadians and my brothers and sisters in the 50 states USA, who are my family here. Pledge your allegiance to our family, and of course we got that right and left, and in the center I'm a pro-labor and love universal revolutionary centrist. My centrism is tied hand in hand with my Trinity theory. So my centrist, when I say I'm a universal revolutionary centrist, you have to understand that it's North American centric fundamentally. As much as I can be a world citizen as much as I can. My theories, protocols are for what I call the North American collective fundamentally. We are an emergent civilizational complex, North America. We are an emergent civilizational complex in North America, of course, so we have to substitute and integrate in all the appellational forces where we are, of course, concordia to the future possibility of even of a thermonuclear war, as I predicted the current international conflagration back in 2019, where we have, of course, now to be the dynamics, of course, of the integration of the appellation, of course, of all the constituents of the North American complex, such as the 10 provinces, 50 states, and 3 territories, which we're going to suffuse, merge into the Imperial American Republic, of course, the Imperial American Republic, the United Integrated Super International Super Integrated States of the 63, of course, for the total be the benevolent dominance and dominion be the, by the implementation of my theories such as the DRT, the debt refusion, for the creation of the new currency known as the UE, U dot universal, E dot exchange, U dot UE, UE. We're going to create the UE by the debt refusion theory, which we're going to implement. We're going to create the universal exchange unit, UE, or the equivalent, aka the imperial dollar, which is going to at the beginning have the value of the US dollar. So, and we're going to rebuild the ghettos. We're going to rebuild the North American inner urban cities, aka the ghettos. We're going to mass finance fitness. We're going to rehabilitate as much of our brothers and sisters who have lost their liberty, the Imperial Criminal Rehabilitation Act. And of course, if you have 44 criminal convictions more in the past 11 years, then we're going to not implement the Imperial Criminal Rehabilitation Act. We're going to implement the Imperial Dracula Act. Imperial Dracula Act. Gonna want to go Vlad the Impaler on that, But nonetheless, a lot of people deserve second, third chances, myself included. I guess I was saved in order to save other people, and I gotta give a call of the heart, because 2 days ago I witnessed an incident at a very busy, heavy corner here in Montreal, Hawk Island, a corner of Cavendish and Côte Saint Luc at the intersection. And what I'm making a reference to is something that I discussed. You can check past videos. I discussed the implementation of the Imperial Security Full Circle Protocol. So when you hear the sirens of the police, of the ambulance, of the sirens of the police, of the ambulance, and of course of the fire trucks, the fire trucks, the ambulance, and the police, you turn 180 to the left, 180 to the right. So you turn 180 to the left, 180 to the right. You turn 180 to the left, 180 to the right. So you turn 180 to the left, 180 to the right. Right? 180 to the left, 180 to the right. So to do the full circle, because 180 plus 180 is of course 360. The full circle, of course, 360 implementation, of course, of thereof. 180 to the left, 180 to the right, if you hear the siren. So, because this incident, I actually started verbalizing out loud in French Québécois here. C'est une maudit, vu que vous avez appris à conduire, vous n'entendez pas les sirènes, l'alarme les sirènes des pompiers. I said something like that. But for their safety, because I calculated the velocity, due to my Asperger's, every time when I march, I have a hyper vigilance for myself, my security, and others. Especially when I'm in the where there's cars involved. It's not like you're sitting in a park somewhere or you're sitting drinking coffee in a coffee shop. When you're on the roads, especially when you're on the intersection where you have the plurality of east, west, north, south intersecting, and the firefighters, the fire trucks were coming from the so that points west. That's north for me. That's south for me, south, and in the back is east. So they were coming towards the east. They were coming from the west towards the east, and the other cars were going north and turning eastbound like that. Jack. So they were on the point of collision, right? So my concern was that the drivers didn't fully stop. They kept going. I even noticed that the fire truck, they slowed down. I said, "What are you doing? You're supposed to slow down. Make attention. Don't wait for the light. Doesn't matter if you miss the light. Doesn't matter if you miss the light. They have priority. Maybe they have to save lives because the cars and all that material are important. Money is important, finance, but it's secondary, brothers and sisters, fellow citizens. To life and health and the fitness. And the individual liberty and security. So that's why I got a bit upset 2 days ago by that incident. Because I was calculating. I even got upset. I started basically vocalizing out loud in French, a bit loud. I got a bit loud. I got a bit angry, but anger in a positive way because I was concerned for the cars to get the collision. They were on a point of collision, so just be careful. When you're driving or in a pedestrian, you hear the sirens of the firefighters, the ambulance, or the police. Just double check left and right. What I call the imperial full circle integrated security protocol. So we have to distribute bi-weekly or monthly to fellow citizens across the North American Collective these instructions and this information in the public, because there's an increasing public security concern in the past years with partly from financial economic. I'm not going to philosophize or go into a deeper analysis than that on that, but nonetheless, if you're a millionaire, billionaire, do some charity and please, billionaires, it's December 5th. If I would have been a billionaire, I would have put some youth to work, and of course those who are unemployed, maybe homeless, I would have offered them a few weeks to make some money. Said, hey, you want to dress up as a nutcracker, as a Santa's helper, as something festive in the holiday season. We're going to get some trucks. We're going to buy some wholesale toys and candies, and wholesale toys and candies. And we're going to distribute them throughout the North American complex, in the neighborhoods, with the communities, and organized with the security forces, the police forces, and the public security institutions, public security establishment, and the armed forces of Canada and State. Would have been a joint public-private partnership, and I would have mass financed that to go to give candies and toys and candies and decorations. I love holiday decorations. I really love the red, green, and white combinations, and those that flash fast or have that bright, fast flashing color. I love those a lot. We have some good decorations around the city, around my neighborhood as well. But my phone, I don't have a phone yet. Maybe I'm gonna try to get one over the weekend. Gonna try to go negotiate. I really had to pay my rent first to budget. And last video I did, hours long video that I did, was on the October 30th, and I think it got damaged. It still works. I still receive calls. It's just black. The screen is black, and sometimes it turns just beautiful green, flashes of green. So that is that rock and roll. So basically, I lived for 36 days without a phone. 35 days without a phone. I survived, I guess, and I got a budget to get one. I budgeted, and I think probably not gonna be able to put much money down, but maybe I'll get a monthly deal. Maybe I'll get a monthly deal. With that, and that's gonna be that rock and roll, to get the monthly deal on the perhaps, and doing it, and of course being on the left and the right in the concomitant appellation, of course, of everything that's going on around the world. And I gotta give a salutation again to the firefighters, the truckers, the butchers, the bakers, the nurses, the doctors, and we gotta get that NACWB, the North American Collective Workers Party, aka the Dragon Army, the North American Collective Workers Party, aka the Dragon Army, as we're gonna have to implement in all the dynamics what we have now to be infused and suffused in all the plateaus of the concordance of the coast to coast, ocean to ocean, basically from the Pacific to the Atlantic, in the coming of the fusion of the 63. For our empire, let it rise and let it be. So we're going to integrate across all the North American civilizational complex, in the prudencies, of course, in the constituencies where we have, of course, now to be relegated and suffused, to change a little bit of the topic soon. But nonetheless, I want to raise my cup to the nurses, firefighters, and the daycare workers changing diapers. I always do these meditations, and I have unpublished children's books. I didn't 3.5 years ago. I was ready to publish my books, but $500 I didn't have to pay for the literary agent. Literary agent costs $500 to open up the shop, basically the dossier, to open up the file. So $500 I did not have. $500, of course, to open up the dossier, and of course to be concomitant, of course, in to launch the writing of the books, because I wrote a few books, children's books. They integrate a bit of fitness, movements of the body, some dance moves, and they are usually related to civilization and nature. Those are the main themes: civilization and nature, and the interaction of children with nature and civilization by asking questions, or by rhythmic, or like poem like semi-poetry type of rock and roll type of, for basically children between ages of like 3 to 9, I guess. 3 to 9. Most 3 to 9. It has to be read out loud, of course, but yeah, I have a few. I have actually even a series. So that's what it is with the rock and roll. Now I want to discuss spirituality, mystic, because it's full moon. So before, maybe tomorrow, Saturday, on the Sabbath or Sunday, we're gonna do Priestess, which is I, the goddess, forgotten goddess, speck of dust that I am, gonna dance on the full moon on the weekend special. So, forgotten goddess, the goddess, gods of the forgotten gods of even the Bible. So, of the Bible. So I could say a mystery of the Bible. Mystery of the Bible. Now, you have to leave the baggage at the door, of course, because when I say the word goddess, of course, I'm making all sorts of ideas, theories are conjured in the minds of somebody who is more or less initiate into matters of mystic matters, occult matters, esoteric matters. Now, I'm not a great initiate nor a great mystic. I don't make those claims to be, but I get a little bit of clouds, get a little bit of thunder, get a little bit of moodiness, and I live with my scars. I live with my dream, the dancing goddess and the dragon kingdom, which is fundamentally to unite Canada, United States into the Imperial Republic complex of the 63 via the Trinity of theories, the Detrofusion theory, the DRT, the CIT, Citizen Integration theory, the DFT, Democratic Fusion theory, the Trinity of theories via the fourth dimension. So that is the consequential dream which I have here in the North American dynamic to be. So please, millionaire athletes and artists and billionaires and millionaires and the CEOs and the players of the NFL, National Football League, NHL, National Hockey League, NBA, National Basketball Association, MLB, support the foundation of the Dancing Goddess Army for the environment and for pleasure to have the integrated Imperial Dance League parallel with the Dragon Army. Pledge your legions, the Dragon Army, aka the Imperial Integrated SSD Legion, only to serve for SSD, based on my philosophy, such as the body is a temple for pleasure and purpose, and to be integrated with all institutions and organizations, both in the public-private partnership manner, in the corporations and organizations. Forgotten Goddess. Now, there's a mystery of the Bible, right? If I say, for example, the God of Israel, like the God of Israel, are supposed to be, I guess, the God of those who are monotheistic, who believe in one God, or the unity of God, or whatever we want to define it, right? Where we say Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, right? Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. But we're also making a reference to a text, the Old Testament, the Torah, the Bible, which were, of course, the transcriptions over many millennia and centuries, and some of which remains, I guess, just like the pyramid texts also remain there, because we have papyrus of Annee, papyrus of Annee, which is dates for 3,300 years ago, and it's still legible, it's still intact. As are my temples, and temples for, I guess, my fellow Thelemites, those pyramids, which are temples and tombs, and I guess they're temples and tombs that be revealed. And they still remain. So as much as I want to build the forgotten goddess, G-O-D-D-S-S, temple here to be 11 times bigger than the St. Joseph's Oratory, the goddess, 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 the pyramids remain, and I guess doesn't need me to build a goddess, doesn't need me to build temples or any temple for the god or the goddess, because they already got and still have the pyramids, I guess. So in that sense, we're gonna go to the Bible. See, because I say God of Israel, well, God, goddess of Israel. How many names? Maybe many names. Yaakov, who had a twin, had a twin. Jacob and Esau are the twins, the twins. So, after this is just an introduction, because we're going to go on the mystic relation of Jacob and Esau and the twins, and harmony and the rebalancing of a justice system, and how sometimes justice is done in concordiate, and how we have certain principles, which are relegated to a more mystic spirituality understanding of, I guess, the universe, or what we can understand about the individual self and the collective as we progress or evolve in a spiritual, technological, spiritual manner. And the fact that we have the paradox of the fact that even today, with all the satellites, sats, in a parallel life is the year of darkness 2020. I build supercomputers, microchips, ICBM rockets, satellites, and everything to do with science and technology. I also have Asperger's, as I do have in this life. But I'm also, in that life, I'm a scientist. In this life, I'm a mystic, spiritual teaching student, and philosopher and artist, and Adrian HannaH Dragon, androgynous, pansexual, geopolitical, theoretical, analyst, theorist, and philosopher and strategist. The God of Israel, of course, has to also be the goddess of Israel, if we are to go by the Bible. A very important part of Jacob, aka Israel, the mythical figure, right, of which we have a name of a state of a country, much controversy and turmoil and questions and mystery surrounding the state of Israel, and that it relates to that name of the past in the Bible of more than 3,500 years ago, circa, right? The pyramids were built circa 4,500 years ago. So the pyramids were supposedly there when Jacob, Israel, was there, right? Because the pyramids were built 4,500 years ago. And send a little bit of me at the city of the pyramids. Every 11 years, switch me from Mount Royal, at top of Mount Royal, to Hampton, New Jersey, with Papa Crowley, and after that, the pyramids. But nonetheless, the representation is, no, when Jacob Israel was, the pyramids were there. So today we don't still know how they were actually built, right? I always joke, I said, men can't figure out how the pyramids were built because they were built by women. So the text, there's a mystery in the Bible, in the text in the Torah, and that is Jacob Israel's embalmment in Genesis chapter 50. Now there's a quote unquote a problem with what's written there, because Jacob Israel was embalmed by the physicians of the Pharaoh. But at that time, the ones who were accorded this funerary rites of ancient Egypt, they had to be the same religion and spirituality as the Pharaoh was. And also the Pharaoh, he had also to uphold laws, what's called the 42 laws, and then you parallel with the 42 laws of the 42 journeys of Israel, of the Israelites. You had to uphold laws and morality as well, right? They were a higher morality, higher source of justice and morality and order, and morality and higher order of being in the world, and had to accord some justice, as in the ancient text prove that the rich should give some charity and build some houses and build some tents and build some good and food and provide food for the poor and all those more moral charitable inclinations as well, which were related to the goddesses, if you want, or there was one supreme goddess, one main goddess, and then several manifestations of this goddess's power. But nonetheless, it's written in black and white that Israel, Jacob, who became Israel, the patriarch of the 12 tribes, was embalmed, and they took the full 40 days and 70 days. But these funerary rites, just like today, if you're part of a religion, that religion, spirituality, does it in its own religious spirituality. If you're whatever religion you are, right? Whatever religion you are, whatever spiritual beliefs you are. Me, I want a greater feast. I want a greater feast. To whom I just want written a wannabe Thelemite. That's all. That's all rock and roll. Adrian HannaH Dragon. So the fact that Jacob Israel was embalmed and was accorded this right, because there were rites and incantations made during that process of embalmment, as it's written in Genesis chapter 50 that Jacob Israel was embalmed. Some of those processions, they involved the god, the goddess, the goddesses. Goddess, or the twin of the goddess, were a multiplicity of the goddesses, as we understand the mysteries and the mystic mysteries of the spirituality of ancient Egypt, of the mysteries of God, of the goddesses, right? By the ancient Egyptian funerary rites. So Jacob Israel was embalmed and was accorded ancient Egyptian funerary rites. But you have to understand that in order to be accorded these ancient Egyptian funerary rites, you had to be the same spiritual mystic religion as the physicians, because it's written there in black and white. These physicians were like today's priests, today's rabbis, today's imams when Jacob Israel lived, right? Because in the Bible there were not the rabbis as the rabbis developed, and the priests, there was not Christianity yet, it was not Islam yet, there was not Judaism as we have today, the transcriptions of what is Judaism today, right? And the question of who is a Jew, who's a Jew, who's a Jew, I guess it's still a question today, right? Who's a Jew or who's not a Jew? Who is a Jew who doesn't know he's a Jew? From the 12 tribes of Israel, and the fact that Shlomo HaMelech, Solomon the king, married Pharaoh's daughter. Solomon, it's written there in the Bible in black and white in 1 Kings 1:3. Solomon married Pharaoh's daughter. So wait a minute here. Something doesn't add up. So Solomon married Pharaoh's daughter. Something doesn't add up. Something doesn't add. There's more questions than answers, right? If Jacob Israel was embalmed, then these funerary rites involved the invocation, chanting, feasting, doing the processions of the ancient funerary rites according to the goddess and the goddesses, and the gods and the goddesses, or the mystical spiritual beliefs of the ancient Egyptian, which included the goddess. Whatever names we give the goddess, right? We could give different names to the goddess, forgotten goddess, right? She's the heavens, the earth, dances with her brother the sun, I guess, every day. Full moon today until Sunday, special 3-day feast. But nonetheless, if you read the text, that means that they had to be the same religion, they had to be the same spiritual mystic beliefs, which included the goddess, Jacob Israel. If he was, it's written there in black and white in the Torah, in the Bible. Had to be the same religion, because the physicians invoked it says there that it took 40 days, which was the embalmment, and the 70 full days for the whole process. That's the whole process, when the invocations of the goddesses and the gods and the processions thereof involved specialized funerary rites. Those mystic spiritual guides, initiates of then are like today's rabbis, imams, and priests and perform those rites, but according to the ancient Egyptian religion. So Jacob Israel had to be the gods of Israel.